promotion. Very pleased to have you all here, and those of you watching us online. And it's my pleasure to introduce Alison Sterling, who is one of the producers now making one of the iFeature films in Bristol. Congratulations to Alison, because it was a very tough process that you went through to get that far, and a very highly competitive process. So I'm aware of your short films from the past, and I think today we're going to hear all about how you've made that journey, really, from the shorts to features. And thank you very much for coming, Alison Sterling.
Pleasure. Let me put it back here. I wonder whether you wanted to, because we're quite an intimate little group, I wonder whether you want to just sort of feel the emphasis in the front. So I thought maybe I should talk about what a producer does for a start. A lot of people bizarrely ask me that. You know, when you meet people or you're at some dinner party and they go, well, what do you actually do? You know, because you've got a director who's directing the actors and you've got a DOP who's holding the camera. What does the producer do? And actually, it's a really, really difficult question to answer. So I thought I would. Well, actually, I can't really answer it because I can only answer it partially by saying what I do. So I will talk a little bit about that. But also, you all know that experience when you sit in some Hollywood film, the credit roller comes up at the end, and there are, like 18 producers? There's your producer, and then there's another producer, and usually there's a third producer, and then there's a co-producer, a couple of executive producers, an associate producer, and a line producer. So if anybody's interested, I can talk a bit about that later on. But I thought perhaps what I'd start with is, broadly speaking, what my background is and how I came to sort of be roughly where I am at the moment. I think most people become producers kind of by accident. I think they sort of start off wanting to be something else, and then they realise actually producing is so much more interesting than all those other things. And the reason I love producing is because you're there at the beginning and you're there at the end. I started out as an actress. And the thing about actors is that you come into the process for a tiny little period. They bring you in and they stick you in your caravan, and when it's your scene they bring you out and then they put you back in the caravan, and then that's it, you're done. And all the stuff that happens before and all the stuff that happens afterwards, you know nothing about. This thing that you're part of is shaped entirely outside of your control, unless of course you're a very powerful actor. So I started as an actress. I did my degree, I went to RADA, and I spent the first, I suppose, sort of 10 years of my working life as an actress. But within about kind of 3 years of that, I began to find it quite frustrating because of exactly the thing I was talking about, where you literally get wheeled in and wheeled out again. So I set up a theatre company. I ran a theatre company called Moving Target Productions, and we used to do sort of small scale touring stuff, tended to be with an emphasis on women's theatre, women's writing, women directors. We weren't kind of completely exclusive. We used to invite men in occasionally, but we tried to privilege the woman's story because we felt that wasn't kind of fully represented on stage. And it was a way of me giving myself some work. Be really sort of basic and practical about it. So I ran Moving Target sort of in parallel with a kind of TV acting career for about 10 years. Came to Bristol 21 years ago. Again, sort of slightly by accident, came to do an acting job. Met my partner who was directing it, stayed in Bristol. And I worked for a little while for a company called Fat Chance Productions, which was a TV production company, a slightly kind of eccentric one because it was founded and owned by actors. And inevitably, it fell to pieces within about 2 years. But I did learn the ropes. I made 4 documentaries through that company, which was great for me because I actually started to learn the nuts and bolts of how TV production works. And after about 2 years with that, I set up my own company, which was Ignition Films, which is fundamentally just a shell for what I do. It's just a structure for me to be a freelance producer. In the last 10 years, 9 years, I've made 9 short films, which is really too much for anyone. And I think the thing that's interesting about them, I got my CV out this morning and I actually looked at how all 9 of those had come about. And I realised that the pathways to each of them were absolutely unique and very, very, very different. One was funded by the filmmaker. He'd written a script, he wanted to be a filmmaker. He had £25,000 that his granny had given him, and he decided to sink it all into this short film. And he basically brought me on as a line producer to deliver this film. I have to say it was the least artistically successful film I've been involved in. 2 were funded sort of by my company and basically thrown together on a wish and a prayer, sort of £5,000 budget. 2 were funded through the Digital Shorts programme, which I'm assuming people know something about, but if you don't, put up your hand and ask later if you're interested. 1 was funded by the BBC in collaboration with a company called Stink Productions, who are a commercials house, who look after the 2 directors, and that's the film you're going to see later. 1 was funded by the University of Bristol with a grant from the AHRC. 1 was funded by television, by HTV. That doesn't happen anymore. And 1 was funded by Bristol Vic Theatre School. So money came in all sorts of sort of bizarre ways, and every single one, the development process was different. So I thought I'd talk a little bit. Can I find out actually who am I talking to? Let's just have hands up. Who here is a producer? Who here wants to be a producer? Who here has produced a short film? Okay, so I don't want to sort of, everybody kind of knows broadly what that's like. So let me ask, what are you most interested in hearing about? Would you like to hear about the iFeatures thing and the step up to features, the particular one that I've done, or shall we talk a little about a short film first?
I think it would be good to hear a little bit of both, actually, without being,
Fine.
I think the short film is where most of us have had experience, but making that magic leap, would be fascinating to hear too. Okay.
In which case, what I think I should do is show you first that the last short film I made was a short film called Turning, and it's only 10 minutes. And I thought I would there we are. And I thought I'd show you the DVD. This was, just tell you the background. This was funded by the BBC and Stink that I mentioned. And it's made by a couple, a slightly bonkers Israeli couple called Carney Arieli and Saul Freed. They make their money, they make their bread and butter making commercials. And they work with mixed media and animation, and they are very much kind of image-driven couple. They tend to work with pictures very much more than stories. Most of the other films I've made tend to be driven by narrative, but this one was driven very much by images. It's based on a short story by a Canadian writer called Linda Sexton, called Turning, about a little boy whose birthday it is. And I was brought on board basically because Carney and Saul live in Bristol, and their representation in London decided it would be a good idea to shoot it in Bristol, and so they looked around for a Bristol producer, and for some reason kind of ended up with me. I don't know how many other people said no before they came to me, but they ended up with me. It was made for approximately £25,000, which is a lot for a short, I would say. When you compare it to a lot of the digital shorts. It was shot on 35mm film, anamorphic, because they wanted the widescreen, the 2.35 ratio. And it was shot on location in Bristol. It took us a week to shoot. The post-production went on forever, and you'll see why when you look at it. Why don't we look at the film now, if you can play that, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.